of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. From Psalm 31. In you, Lord, I take refuge. Let me never be put to shame. In your justice deliver me. Incline your ear to me. Make haste to rescue me. Be a rock of refuge, a stronghold to save me. You are my rock and my fortress. For your name's sake, lead and guide me. Free me from the net they have set for me, for you are my refuge. Into your hands I commend my spirit. You will redeem me, Lord, faithful God. I will rejoice and be glad in your love. Once you have seen my misery, observed my distress. You will not abandon me into enemy hands, but will set my feet in a free and open space. During this time of the lockdown and the virus, quite often we ask ourselves the question, maybe you don't, but some people do, couldn't God have created a better universe? Couldn't he have created a better world than this one? And of course, the answer is yes, he did create a better world than it is now. When he created the universe, he created also two human beings. We call them, from sacred scripture and sacred tradition, Adam and Eve. In fact, he planted them in a place called paradise. You couldn't get any better than that, huh? Paradise. Yes, you could. Heaven. They weren't seeing God directly. They weren't having the beatific vision. What they were doing and what was going on, we hardly know. But sacred tradition tells us that they were created in sanctifying grace, and they were given all kinds of gifts, all kinds of food in paradise they could eat except for one tree, and on and on. I mean, they were given what we Catholic theologians call the grace of creation, different from our sanctifying grace a little bit. Our sanctifying grace is based upon Christ's redemption. We receive it because of his cross. So far, nobody had fallen into sin. But at a certain point in their happiness, they had to make a choice, either to obey God in a particular fashion or not obey God. And so, since their emotions were in perfect synchronization with reason and faith, and since they were, well put together psychologically, etc., they didn't have temptations like we have. They were given one major temptation coming from the evil one, who is placed in Genesis as a kind of a serpent, snake. And he's given the ability to talk. Now, this might be, and usually is interpreted to be a metaphor, but metaphor that still has something that's true. It's just not a fictitious thing. The evil one suggests to Eve that if she eats of the fruit of good and evil, she will be what she wants to be, like God, like Yahweh, the name for God in those times. And she starts to waffle a little bit. Maybe she thinks it isn't all such a bad sin to have a disobedience about the question of a piece of fruit. Again, the question of the fruit, a metaphor. We don't know exactly what's behind this. And so, after listening to the evil one, whom apparently kind of tricked her because he was speaking in English, or well, false. He was speaking in the language that she spoke, which serpents normally don't do. So she falls for it, eats the fruit, and then at a certain point in time, gives to Adam the same idea. Here, eat some of this fruit. And then comes payback or pushback. Both of them then lose the grace of creation. Both of them now are going to experience the major defects that would flow from disobeying God. Not as if they were imposed upon them by God, but rather they kind of flow from the very nature of sin, grave sin in this particular case. So what happens? They're expelled from this beautiful world of paradise, wherever it was, don't know. And then they had to face the same problems we have to face, because we're inheritors of them. They're the first two parents. Adam is to represent the whole human race in a very special way, as well as Eve in a lesser sort of a way. So, what's the problem? Well, the problem that we already know, where we don't have to be theologians to figure this out. We know that there's something wrong with us. We suffer, and sometimes suffer with great pain. Sometimes we don't know the cause of our sufferings physically. We have diseases that we can easily get, as we've got now the COVID-19. We also experience fatigue. And we also experience psychologically quite often a lot of sorrow, feelings of discouragement from time to time, depression from time to time. And we kind of know that our feelings sometimes contradict what we should be really doing. In today's modern world, people think that following your conscience means to follow your feelings. People in the secular world think you can kind of know by intuition what's the right thing to do. Just like Adam and Eve didn't think they were doing something so terribly wrong. They too were following their consciences, thinking that it wasn't all that bad to disobey God. Well, they found out differently. They also we're told that they're going to die. And death is really a very, very awful thing to go through. A substantial change whereby the soul leaves the body, usually because of major defects in the body, of the heart, the brain, a disease infiltrates, cancer, whatever. Likewise, as a result of that original sin, which, as I said in my little blurb that you saw, wasn't that original, wasn't that creative. It was an ordinary thing to do in a way, just simply disobey God. Pardon me. Father had me eating dinner a little late, that's why. I've got stuff in my throat. So anyway, here I am, a sinner. I've inherited these things, but there's more that I've inherited than I've just described, huh? We also experience tension between male and female. Those of you who are married know more so than I do, who am not married, because of different psychologies, a different personality setting of male, female. There's a certain amount of tension that grows, as we know from experience. And quite often men have a tendency to dominate and manipulate and control women. See that in the history of the slaves, all these terrible things going on. Likewise, because of original sin, our minds are not as sharp as they could be. Our memories are not as easily, we don't easily retain things that we learn. We have to kind of repeat over and over again. Sometimes our imaginations go wild and we imagine the worst of people, don't we? Original sin, effect, its wounds. Certain blindness of mind, a certain inability to fulfill what we think is the right thing because our wills are weakened too. Think of it, when you begin to make a decision and you say, yes, I'm going to do this. I'm going to give up smoking starting tomorrow. I'm going to give up smoking tonight. And then in 2 weeks, you're smoking twice as much. Promises, 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 broken. It's not easy to stick to decisions. In fact, it's not easy to make good decisions. You have to think about consequences. You have to think about what's right. You have to come to a practical decision, and then you got to carry it out. 3 major steps there. Well, quite often we don't even get to stage 1. We just simply act. Or maybe all we do is rest in stage 1. We simply think, discern, ponder. 10 years go by, we still haven't made a major decision yet. I'm thinking of people who think of wanting to enter religious life or become priest. I'm still discerning, Father. Also, we have a certain amnesia about God and his existence and his ability and his love for us. That's why we really go to Mass every Sunday, and why we're taught to pray daily, so that we won't forget him much. We'll still forget him, unfortunately, but not forget him as much if we're going to Mass on Sunday. Try to go to frequent confession once a month or more if necessary. We tend to forget who we are. our dignity. And this isn't something that's willed, it's just sort of, it's hard to be prudent, to be fair. It's hard to be courageous and faithful. It's hard to be humble. It's difficult to be chaste and pure. Very difficult. Why is it so difficult? Well, it begins with original sin. It's not God's fault. Well, you can say, well, he could have just simply, after Adam and Eve, okay, you people, you blew it out of the water. I'm going to create another Adam and Eve. But he chose not to. Now, in addition to these problems, we also find it difficult to work and to be faithful in work. Whether we're farmers or plumbers, garbage men or doctors, nurses or teachers. It's not easy to be consistent, to strive to do things in an excellent manner. Also, the macroscopic universe, or I should say the world, I can't speak of the other stars, etc., but in this particular globe of ours, we also experience storms, earthquakes, deleterious things of famine and the virus. All those flow because of the sin of Adam and Eve. We call them punishments because they go against the grain of the will and the mind and the heart. However, these punishments can also be the beginning of a purification of our lives. That comes later. It comes from the New Testament. Just looking precisely at original sin, you can see the mess that we're in. Now, in addition to the sin of Adam and Eve, they also committed personal sins, as far as we know, because they didn't have sanctifying grace. If you don't have sanctifying grace, your ability to do the right thing consistently and faithfully doesn't happen. You fall into more sins. We call those personal sins. They can be grave, they can be semi-light, they can be heavy in the sense that they can be really awful, but not yet grave. And so, we, the offspring of Adam and Eve, we've inherited the mess that they've created. We call that the bad news. And if that's all religion is about, the bad news, then we're in really deep trouble. We can't get out of it. Well, why didn't God just simply get rid of Adam and Eve, start all over again? Well, because when they decided to do it their way and fell from the grace of God, they treated God unjustly. And that injustice needed atonement. Just like if I go and burn your house down, I can't just simply come up to you and say, gee, I'm terribly sorry, and I promise I won't do it again. Of course, that's silly. No, I might say I'm deeply sorry, and I hope I will never do such a thing to anybody again. But now I've got to do something to make up for that. I've got to make satisfaction. I've got to make reparation. I've got to give you the price of the house. If I don't have the price of the house, I've got to do something to make up for it. Reparation for the evil that I've done to your home. Well, in this case, I have to make reparation. Adam and Eve would have to make reparation for the insult and the indignity that they caused toward God, who's infinite. And God demanded that somehow, some way, that sin be atoned for, as well as their own personal sin. The bad news is they couldn't do it. No mere human being can atone for their sins on their own to God. We can atone to a human being, but we can't do it with God. He's infinite. We're finite. We can never match the evil with the goodness that we owe to God. There's part of the problem, part of the bad news. And yet, some way, from another point of view, might be good news, as we'll see in a moment or two. So God chose to demand reparation from human nature. That's why he didn't create new people, starting afresh. Yes, he creates human beings. We're all new to this world. I was born in 1937. Before that, I didn't exist, and neither did you. God loves to create human beings, yes, but not start all over again. No, he wanted to see this through. And somehow he wanted reparation. And of course that explains why God became one of us. The third joyful mystery of the rosary. Jesus Christ, true God, true man, begotten of the Father from all eternity, as the second person of the Blessed Trinity, became incarnate in time 2,000 years ago in order to be a representative of the entire human race for the sins of Adam and Eve and for the sins of every human being that has ever existed and will exist, inheriting those sins and causing other sins themselves. The incarnation was God's way of atonement, of making satisfaction from self. It's something like this. Let's suppose I go to you and it's the last day, I owe you $1 million. And I come to you on the day that it's due, let's say it's a bank, and I say, I can't pay it. I can give you $1. And the banker says, I'll take the $1. And then he writes out a check for $999,000, makes it out to you. Then he hands you the check. And then he says, now pay me back. And you look at it, sign it, you give it back, the debt is canceled. That's kind of like what the incarnation and the redemption was about. Not just the incarnation, not just the redemption, but the two going together. In his flesh, God wanted to make atonement by suffering love. in his flesh by producing all the merits, all the reparation that every human being needs to make. And no matter how evil we have become, no matter how terrible we are, if you admit it to him, especially in confession, he forgives you. It's quite extraordinary when you think about the incarnation in relationship to the fall and to sin. If Hitler had gone to confession, he could have been forgiven all of his crimes, sins, like that. And if he'd have gone to one Mass afterwards, that one Mass objectively was substantially capable of atoning for his own personal leftover sins. That's the mystery of the incarnation and the redemption. Extraordinary when you think about it. If God would have done something else, he could have, but he chose to do it in his way. He chose to be our servant and to give us extraordinary help and grace. We must never forget this. But it goes back to the bad news. And I've just only touched a little bit of the troubles and the sorrows that go with the bad news. Go on further into the troubles of temptation, the troubles of a bad government, the troubles of war, the troubles, it's all over the place. And how difficult it is to do God's will by ourselves alone. So clear. We see it day by day. And of course, right now, we're experiencing a kind of a purification going on, too. Punishment. Terrible experience for many of you who feel lonely, abandoned perhaps, not quite understanding why, not quite understanding when it's going to end, having to change your routines, not being able to do the things you'd like to do. Once you cooperate and let go, then your will is being, shall we say, scrubbed from self-centeredness and the like. Getting back to the Psalms, that Psalm 31, one of my favorites. Be gracious to me, Lord, for I am in distress. With grief my eyes are wasted, my soul and body spent. My life is worn out by sorrow, my years by sighing. My strength fails in affliction. My bones are consumed. I'm forgotten, out of mind like the dead. I'm like a shattered dish. But I trust in you, Lord. I say you are my God. My times are in your hands. Rescue me from my enemies, from the hands of my pursuers. Let your face shine on your servant. Save me in your kindness. But let me not be put to shame, for I have called to you, Lord. how great is your goodness. Blessed be the Lord, who has shown me wondrous love, been for me a city most secure. Once I said in my anguish, I am shut out from your sight. Yet you heard my plea when I cried to you. Love the Lord, all you faithful. The Lord protects the loyal, but repays the arrogant and fool. Be strong and take heart, all you who hope in the Lord. Now I'd like to just simply let you think about these things that I've mentioned. And let's now pray one decade of the rosary. Just one decade. You don't have to, those of you here in church, you don't have to kneel. Let's offer to our blessed Lord the first joyful mystery of the rosary, Mary consenting in our name to bring salvation to the whole world, the Annunciation. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Glory to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit. O my Jesus, forgive us our sins, save us from the fires of hell. Lead all souls to heaven, especially those most need of thy mercy. Well, because of original sin, we have within us certain enemies that we have to do battle with from time to time. Spiritual life is called in sacred tradition a battle against the world, the flesh, or the devil. But to understand the battle, it's kind of important to understand, well, be more precise. What's the battle about? And since the time of the early church, especially as it was formulated by Pope St. Gregory the Great, whose feast day will be coming up next week, it's important that we sometimes examine our consciences by thinking of the capital vices. What are the capital vices? Well, the Catechism of the Catholic Church lists 7. St. Thomas lists 8, but this isn't per se a contradiction. For you see, what caused Adam and Eve to sin was pride and arrogance. It was the same kind of sin that caused the fall of the angels. They wanted to do it their way. And in the teaching of Thomists, as well as other spiritual authors, pride is called the queen of the vices. Then she has her lieutenants, and those lieutenants are called vainglory, the desire that's out of sync with reason, for praise, adulation, honor. Again, excessive, extraordinary, deep, deep. Then comes avarice, the desire excessively for money and material things, as if you can find your happiness exclusively in those things. The more I possess, the more being I have, would be the temptation there. Then comes envy, the sadness that comes when somebody has a gift you don't have, or has something you don't have. Or worse, the delight in when someone you dislike comes down from their pedestal or gets harmed and hurt, and you're so glad. Oh, I feel so much better now that he or she's out of the way, or they've lost a lot of money, or they're not as smart as they think they are, and on and on and on. And then comes the capital vice of anger, getting upset over all kinds of things that don't need to get upset about. Quite often, the more self-centered you are, the more you interpret words from others as insults, and so you get angry. Though there are times when you must get angry, when you're obliged to get angry, when evil is winning and you have to stand up and forthrightly defend perhaps innocent human life. Perhaps somebody's attacking your family. You've got to be angry in order to fight them, to win the battle. But lots of times, for most of us, expressing our anger is wrong. Feeling anger isn't yet wrong, because we have to consent to those feelings if they're out of sync with reality. You can see in these capital vices, they have to do primarily with the intellect and the will and interpersonal relationships, and to some extent material things. The next vice of gluttony is the excessive desire for food, drink, alcoholic beverages, we could even say cigarettes, drugs, all those things that lead to just simply pleasure for pleasure's sake. The next vice we call lust, the excessive desire for sex as an end in itself, not conjugal acts to produce children and to foster intimacy in marriage. That's not necessarily lust when it's guided by reason and faith. And then finally, there's what we call in the history of the capital vices, a word called acedia, sometimes translated as sloth, but it's really a certain boredom about spiritual things, so that the desire for spiritual things appears to be a kind of an evil that you don't want to do. So it's not fun to pray the rosary. It's not fun to go to Mass. It's not fun to think about God. It's not fun to think about what's right. It's kind of sad. And I don't want to take the means to get rid of this sadness except to lose myself in sin. Well, that's quite a lot, isn't it? Pride being the primary, shall we say, the queen, and each lieutenant also produces sons of vice, or daughters of the vice. 42 of them, to be exact. I could stay here for a month and we could spend time talking about them. We don't have the time. But if we at least can know the basics and try to overcome them, then a lot of the terrible effects of living these vices are nipped in the bud. Now, what is pride, anyway? Well, it has a good use, as you know. You're proud of your heritage. You recognize its dignity, its importance, the accomplishments of your heritage. You're proud of your children, what they represent, the good that they do. They're not saints yet, but you're still proud of them. You're proud of your accomplishments, work, play. Sometimes mothers who are stay-at-homes, they're kind of proud in the good sense of the way the house looks. Neat and tidy and looks great. No? Or if you cook a great meal and everybody enjoys your pasta or enjoys your dessert, etc., you feel good. You feel proud of what you did and what you accomplished. It's normal. The trouble is, one can develop an excessive feeling of how great I am, how better I am. And so I can love my accomplishments as if I possess them by myself alone, without the help of God. Or if God did help me, I deserved it. He needed to do it because I deserved it. I gave the church $500. God deserved, God was paying back what I gave him. This constant turning over into oneself, one's excellences, one's accomplishments, one's perfections. What a great mathematician I am. What a great musician I am. What a great cook I am. What a great this I am. I am. It's about me. And then I start to brag about me. Now, it can get worse. And it can really get worse when it comes down to where the Adam and Eve and Lucifer did. I'm not going to depend upon God at all. I'm not going to rely on God. I don't need God. And his commandments and his desires for me, I'm going to follow my own way, my own feelings, my own desires. Freedom, that's me. It's all about me. God, and so you can see where this can lead. If you no longer wish to to maintain a relationship with God and obey Him, then you create your own standards. You create your own way of doing things. Yes, you follow your conscience to hell. It's a false conscience. It's a conscience that leads away from right reason and faith. Now, the property of pride is vainglory. Why? Well, you see, the proud person wants other people to agree with him or her. And so the proud person wants others to idolize, praise, glorify me for what I stand for what I am, for what I've done. I want others to see my excellences and how important I am and how glorious I am. That, of course, leads to an awful lot of other problems of which we don't have the time to go into. And so what's the antidote? Well, there are many antidotes, but more immediately, the antidote to pride and vainglory is humility. For what is humility but the virtue that accepts my limitations? The virtue that sees that I'm not omnicompetent, I'm not all perfection. I'm not the best of everything. I'm not the best of a lot of things. But what I do has limits. My talents are limited. I can't do everything. The more I grow in humility, the more I begin to notice the good in other people. When I'm filled with myself and adulating myself and bragging to myself, I can't notice how good you are and your talents and your gifts because I'm wrapped up into me. So, humility means accepting my limitations and then also being willing to look at other people and see their goodness and praise them too. Honor them. In fact, St. Paul challenges us. He says at one point, think of others better than yourself. How can that possibly be? If I'm a prison chaplain, how can I think of the people in the prison better than me, who is a priest? Simple. They probably have certain gifts and talents, first of all, that I don't have. Second of all, some of them may have a great holiness that I can't possibly match. Somehow they've reformed and they've changed, and they're different. And they're very close to God. And God seems to give them more graces than He gives to me. Praise be Jesus Christ. And that's true in life too. If more families develop the virtue of humility, how easy it would be for a husband to think, yes, my dearly beloved, you are better than I am. And for her to say, yes, dear, you are better than I am. Well, of course, from certain points of view, we're all superior to one another. And we're all inferior to one another. That's the way God created us. So that we would learn to depend and work together, to depend on one another and work together. True, humility doesn't come easily. We have to pray for this grace. The humble person is never afraid to ask questions. Humble person isn't afraid to say, I don't know. The humble person isn't afraid to acknowledge that someone may know something he doesn't or she doesn't know. Likewise, the humble person is not afraid to admit their sins either, especially their sins to the priest in the confessional. If I ever became Pope, I would change the name of the sacrament of penance to the sacrament of humility. But you won't have to deal with me, thank God. Because it is the sacrament of humility, where you admit your faults and your failures, your stupidities, and you begin again. I sometimes think the reason why people don't go to confession these days is because they come to confession, they say, "Bless me, Father, for I have not sinned. You tell me what I've done wrong, and I'll defend myself." So the priest has to become a prosecuting attorney. That's not humility. That's arrogance. It's been 5 or 10 years since my last confession. I got angry once. Hello, you, wake up, come on, wake up. There's more to it than that. Well, just ask me some questions, Father. Well, if I ask you some questions, you might get angry. Oh, no, I won't. So then I said, well, do you miss Mass? Absolutely not, except once in a while. And then if I go further, then they do get angry. So anyway, humility is a virtue that keeps us away from a lot of anger. And it's humility that keeps us praying, too. We'll talk about that one of these days. It takes humility to spend time with God. When you want to spend time watching baseball for 6 hours, you want to watch 17 movies in 2 days, Sitting down and communicating with God, that takes a bit of humility. And it does, as I said, it doesn't come easily. It's difficult. Virtue is not easy, but it's not impossible either, with the help of God's grace. Another reason why God became one of us and suffered and died, but that's another story. More that later during the week. Humility isn't the only virtue. It's not the greatest of the virtues, but it's a foundation virtue. It's like a broom that sweeps away illusions about ourselves, sweeps away arrogance and the like. Nevertheless, humility also has to work with another virtue called magnanimity. Because as we'll see tomorrow's conference, we've all been called to holiness. We've all been called to try to become saints. So we have a standard here that's high, and is to be aimed at and reachable somewhat. Not like the Blessed Virgin Mary, not like St. Joseph, not like Jesus, not like St. Dominic and some of these giants, but holiness, nevertheless. There are degrees. As there are degrees of the vices, so there are degrees of holiness. There are degrees of virtue. And so we are called to greatness and to aim for greatness, provided we depend upon the grace of God, which I'll talk about more at another time. So we have 2 dimensions here that sort of overcome pride and vainglory. On the one hand, humility, accepting our limitations. On the other hand, magnanimity, aiming for excellence in the best sense of the word, not for self-centered glory, but aim for excellence for the glory of God. As a sign of our love for God. So that I want to be the best scientist. I want to be the best teacher. I want to be the best artist. I want to be the best parent. I want to be the best priest. I want to be the best of whatever it is for the glory of God. And I want to fulfill those gifts and talents that He's given to me for His glory, to manifest His beauty, His truth, His goodness, everything that is so totally His in the depths of being, you see. Well, I want to aim for that. And I want to aim for intimacy with Him. Now, we're talking magnanimity. And at the same time, accepting the fact that we are children of the Father. That we're slow, that we're sinners, and yet we have an extraordinary goal to aim for, and that basically it's a gift. It's a gift from God, heaven itself. But even climbing the mountain of holiness requires gifts from God. That's why we have to learn to develop a love for divine gifts, asking for them, as I'll say later in the week. We don't just simply wait around. We're not in the process of just sitting waiting for a job. We've already got a ministry. We've already got a vocation. We've already got a mission. Now we have to kind of figure out, how am I going to fulfill that? And what do I do with all my weaknesses, with all my imperfections? Still, I'm called to seek the glory of God in excellence. We're sort of like beginning piano players, trying to play Beethoven's Appassionata. If you've ever had to take music lessons like I did as a kid, well, when you start out when you get to the point where you can start playing something of Appassionata, what do? You make mistake after mistake after mistake after mistake, but then you keep going over and keep going over. You try to learn how to put your fingers on the keys so that somehow it'll all work out without a mistake. That's why we love to watch pianists and harpists and flautists and all these wonderful, wonderful classical musicians and even contemporary great jazz musicians who work so hard to produce such excellence. Because that's a kind of a little mirror of what prudence, fortitude, temperance, justice is about. For the life of virtue is putting beauty into our very being. The beauty of God, of course, by the grace of God, of course. Or tomorrow. Let me conclude. Rejoice, you just, in the Lord. Praise from the upright is fitting. Give thanks to the Lord. Sing to God a new song. For the Lord's word is true. All His works are trustworthy. The Lord loves justice and right, and fills the earth with goodness. By the Lord's word the heavens were made, by the breath of His mouth all their hosts. The waters of the sea were gathered as in a bowl. In cellars the deep was confined. Let all the earth fear the Lord, let all who dwell in the world show reverence. For He spoke, and it came to be, commanded, and it stood in place. The Lord foils the plan of nations, frustrates the designs of peoples, but the plan of the Lord stands forever. Wise designs through all generations. Happy the nation whose God is the Lord. From heaven the Lord looks down and observes the whole human race, surveying from the royal throne all who dwell on earth. The one who fashioned the hearts of them all knows all their works. Our souls wait for the Lord, who is our help and our shield. For in God our hearts rejoice, in your holy name we trust. May your kindness, Lord, be upon us, for we have put our hope in you. God bless you. For those of you that are here in church, I'll wander over and hear a confession or two if you want to go.